Hey everyone, welcome back to AI.Divine Insights. Today, we're going deep, like really deep. Welcome back everyone, we're diving deep today, going to unpack a story that's, well, it's kind of woven into history and faith, the Passover. We're going to really uncover the why, not just, the what happened. Exodus chapter 12. That's where we're headed.
It's real, but you've got Pharaoh, right,
Yeah.
in power, not exactly the compromising type.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
So how do you make someone like that give up control?
Yeah.
Especially when they need those people to, work for them.
And that's where the first Passover comes in. God's got a plan, specific instructions. It all starts on the 10th day of the first month. Every Israelite family, they've got to pick a lamb.
Not just any lamb, though, right?
Right. Got to be perfect, no flaws, no blemishes, nothing.
Powerful symbol, isn't it?
It really is. You've got perfection there, but also sacrifice and those ideas, those themes, well, they just keep coming back all through the Bible.
I've always been struck by how, food can be symbolic, to have so much meaning. Is there any food like that for you?
I'd say bread. It's everywhere. So many cultures. It's basic, right? But it means something. Nourishment, being together, even life itself.
Makes sense. Sharing bread, it's essential. It keeps us going. Okay, so back to the Passover lamb. 14th day, twilight, that's when it happens. They have to kill the lamb. And then, this is intense, they paint the blood on their doorposts. Can you imagine what that must have looked like?
Oh, absolutely. Visually, it's got to be striking, right?
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's setting the scene for God to step in, to show the difference between who listened, who obeyed, and who didn't.
And then you've got the meal itself. Roasted lamb, the unleavened bread, and of course the bitter herbs.
Each thing there, it all means something. Roasting, that's about how urgent it is. They're leaving, right now, on the move. Unleavened bread, that's purity. Some people think it's also humility, reminding them they left with nothing, empty-handed.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. Unleavened bread as a symbol of starting from nothing. Has a whole other level to it.
Right. It's not just eating, it's experiencing, The whole thing connects them to what's happening. And this is important, these instructions. It wasn't like, oh, you can do this if you want. It was life or death.
Right. Survival was on the line, depending on if they obeyed or not.
Exactly. And, thinking bigger picture here, that obedience to God, that's how they're going to make it. That's the whole point, all through Exodus.
Okay, so the meal's ready, doors are marked. Here comes the 10th plague, the big one. God sees that blood, passes over those Israelite houses. Their firstborn are safe. But in Egypt, every firstborn, people and animals, it's devastating.
And it wasn't random, It was targeted. They went for what mattered most to Egyptians. Firstborn, that's your legacy, your family's future, everything.
The grief, I can't even imagine. It's so opposite to what the Israelites must have felt. Relief, gratitude.
It's a powerful image, for sure.
So Pharaoh, he finally cracks. I mean, what else could he do? This unbelievable loss. And he tells them to go, get out. And they do. They book it so fast their bread doesn't even have time to rise. Hence, the unleavened bread.
It makes you think, Fleeing your home with just what you're wearing. It's like those refugees all through history, leaving everything behind just to be safe.
Wow, you're right. It connects this old story to something that's sadly happening all the time still.
And they don't leave empty-handed either. They ask the Egyptians for their valuables, right? Silver, gold, clothes. And the Egyptians, they just hand it over. Willingly.
That's always stuck with me. It's like the slaves are now the ones in charge, taking what was taken from them. Wild.
What do you think the Egyptians were thinking? I mean, really, was it fear, guilt, maybe trying to make up for something to a power they didn't get?
So much left unsaid there. But it's a turning point, obviously. And it's not just a one-time escape either. This Exodus, it becomes the whole reason for Passover. Every year, they have to remember this, how they got free. For all the generations to come.
Think about that. It's so important to who they are. They have to remember it every year. The power of going through something together and then having to commemorate it. But it makes you wonder, how did Passover, change over time? How do people celebrate it now?
That's a great question. And I think that's a perfect place to pick up next time in part 2 of our deep dive.
So yeah, we talked about them getting out, all dramatic, and the whole Passover meal, how it got started. But there's this other thing, how this event, it turned into a whole tradition. It's not just remembering, it's, rituals, keeping that memory alive actively.
And those instructions for Passover, they're so specific. 7 days, no bread that's risen, no leavening, can't even have it in your house. And then these special gatherings, the first day and the seventh day. It's serious stuff.
It's wild, how like rituals that can connect you to the past, like a bridge. You're not just hearing the story, you're kind of doing it in a way. I think that's so human, needing that connection to actually do something to remember.
It's like, yeah, building that bridge, using actions, symbols. It's not just reading about it, you're echoing it. But there's this other thing it always gets me.
Oh, for sure. All these other rules about Passover, some of them, well, they seem kind of strange at first anyway. Like, no foreigners allowed, only men, and they had to be
When
circumcised.
you couldn't take any of the lamb out of the house,
Yeah.
had to eat it all there.
Yeah.
And this one, you couldn't break any of the lamb's bones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know. It seems random, right? But it's pointing to something deeper, this idea of like being ritually pure. You're making a separation between what's holy, part of this event, and, well, regular life, everyday stuff.
And that's where the circumcision fits in, right? It wasn't just physical. It was like a sign, the covenant between God and Abraham.
Exactly. It showed you belonged, you were one of the chosen people. So when they say only circumcised men at Passover, it's emphasizing that covenant. It's about who's in, who's out, but spiritually, not just physically.
Which, well, it makes you think about how any group, any community today, how they define themselves, what they do to show who's part of it and who isn't.
It's about belonging, right? And identity. But let's shift gears a bit. We've got the background, the escape, how Passover got started. But I'm curious, what's this all mean to you? Why should we, thousands of years later, even care about this story? What sticks out?
For me, it's the resilience. They went through so much, these people, but they never gave up hope. That faith, that determination to be free, it's just powerful.
That's a great point. And it's human, isn't it? Wanting to be free, not giving up when things are hard. Those ideas, they're everywhere, all through time, every culture.
Definitely. But let's break it down a bit. Freedom, faith, and remembering. It's a lot.
So freedom, the Passover story, it's like this reminder that fight for freedom, it never ends. It's not a one-time thing. It's always there, always a struggle. And sometimes it feels impossible.
And it shows that, nobody just gives you freedom. You got to fight for it. Be brave, make sacrifices, and a lot of times you got to believe in something bigger than yourself.
Which leads to faith, right?
Yeah.
The Israelites, they had to have like a ton of faith in Moses, in God, even in something they couldn't see working behind the scenes. They had to trust that even when things were bad, there was a way out.
They took a huge chance, literally, into the unknown, trusting they'd get to freedom. And then, well, there's the whole remembering part. That's what Passover's all about. Keeping the story alive, telling it to your kids and their kids, on and on.
It's like collective memory, right?
Yeah.
It matters. If you know where you came from, what people went through before you, their struggles, their victories, well, it helps you figure out where you're going.
It's like, yeah, a compass or something, guiding you through all the messy stuff of life.
Yeah.
But also it makes me wonder, what stories do we choose to remember? And which ones get forgotten? Whose voices get heard and whose don't?
That's a deep question. And it's worth thinking about as we look at, how Passover changed, what it means in the world today. Speaking of which, there are so many ways people celebrate Passover now. Jewish communities all over the world, each one's a little different.
Oh, definitely. It's not just one thing. It's been shaped by, well, everything. History, where they lived, their culture, centuries of it.
Right. Some communities, they focus on the Seder, that traditional meal, and the rituals. Others, they're more about social justice and that liberation we were talking about.
That's what makes the whole Passover story so interesting, I think. It's ancient, but it still matters to the world today. It keeps changing, and every generation finds something new in it.
Speaking of new things, remember those rules? The ones that seemed, well, a little odd. Some people think the plagues, those can be interpreted in different ways too. Some see them as like symbols, a clash between Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, and the Egyptian gods.
It's like, yeah, a kaleidoscope, right?
Yeah.
Same event, but different angles. Each one gives you a different idea of what it means.
And that brings us back to, thinking critically, looking at things from different sides. Even with these old texts, there's always more to find, more to question. You never stop learning.
Okay, before we wrap up part 2 here, let's turn it over to you, our listener. What's hitting home for you? What part of the Passover story are you connecting with?
What questions are popping up? What's it making you think about in your own life?
It really is amazing, huh?
Yeah.
How a story like that old can make you think so much. It
Yeah.
just shows you those ideas, freedom, faith, memory. They're still important to people today.
No doubt. And it leads to something pretty interesting. What if you designed a modern Passover, your own ritual to mark a time you broke free, a personal liberation.
Wow, that's deep. What kind of symbols would you use? What would be important enough to remember like that?
It could be anything, really. Breaking free from something that was holding you back, getting past some huge obstacle, or even just making a choice, but a choice that like really lined up with who you truly are.
Those are all, yeah, those are powerful examples. Like for me, I think about that time I finally quit that job.
Yeah.
The one that was, ugh, it was just killing me slowly. It was scary to quit, but oh man, so freeing.
So what would your ritual look like to remember that?
Hmm, good question. Maybe I'd write down all the bad stuff, all the thoughts, the feelings from that job, and then like burn them to show, I don't know, like a release from all that negativity.
Yeah.
How about you? Any big liberation moments that come to mind?
Actually, yeah. For years, public speaking, it was my biggest fear, terrified me. But I knew if I wanted to, share what I knew, what I was passionate about, I had to get over it. So I did, took classes, practiced like crazy, and finally I found my voice.
That's incredible. So what would your modern Passover be like?
I think I'd give a short speech or a presentation to some close friends, just share my story and how I got past that fear. It'd be like a celebration, right,
Yeah.
of winning that battle and a reminder that you can persevere, push through.
I love that. It's so personal, but it's got those same ideas. Courage, not giving up, becoming who you're meant to be.
Exactly. And it shows you rituals, they're not just about the past. They can connect you to now and even help shape your future.
So there it is, the Passover,
Hmm.
a story about freedom, about believing, and
Yep.
about never forgetting. But it's like a challenge, right? To look at our own lives, to see those times we broke free, the times that made us who we are.
It's a story that, well, just keeps going through time, through different cultures. It teaches us about what humans can do. Be resilient, have hope, and really change for the better.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope I don't know, maybe you see this old story in a new light now,
Yeah.
and that it still means something today.
And as you go about your day, think about your own moments of liberation. What did you overcome? What choices set you free? And how can you hold on to those experiences and carry what they taught you into the future? Also, please like and subscribe to AI.Divine Insights for daily podcast episodes.
See you next time.